In this video, we're going to write the inequality for the graph of a linear inequality. So as you look at the graph below, what you should be noticing is that this is the graph of a linear inequality. And we know this because we can see a line on the graph. That is what makes it linear. And we know it's an inequality because of that shading. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to think about how we would actually write the linear inequality for the graph that we see below. Now, what I always suggest is that I suggest you start with just pretending for a second that this is an equation and writing the equation for the line that you see on that graph. I understand that there's shading added into it, but here we can see that we have a line. So we're going to write the equation for that line first. And remember that lines, we can write them into y equals mx plus b form. And remember, in this form for the equation of a line, we have our slope, so we have our slope here, and we have our y-intercept here. So we can write this equation fairly quickly by just looking at these characteristics on the graph. The first thing I note is I can see a number of clear points here. So these are points that are definitely on my line. And so what I can do to find my slope is I can travel from one point to the other and find my rise over my run. So here, if I go from this point to this point, I notice that vertically I'm going down 2, and horizontally I'm going in the positive right direction 1. So what I find here is that my slope is a negative 2 over 1, or just negative 2. Then from here, my y-intercept point is the point where I cross the y-axis. So that's this point right here. So I know that my y-intercept value is also negative 2. So I can start by writing my equation, which is y is equal to negative 2x plus negative 2. Now from here, my goal is to decide what type of inequality is going to go in place of this equation, because really I know that this doesn't represent the graph of an equation, it represents the graph of an inequality. So the first thing I note here is that I have a solid line. This is a solid line, it is not dotted. So this tells me that my inequality will be one of these two. It will have that equal to underneath. So I've now narrowed it down to two inequalities, and the last thing that I need to do is I need to decide, is it a less than or equal to or a greater than or equal to? And what I typically do at this point is I pick a point that's in that shaded region. And here I'm going to pick the point 0, 0. So what I need to do is I need to set up my inequality so that the point 0, 0 works in the inequality. Because it's in this entire shaded region, this point needs to work inside of my inequality, however I write it. So here I'm going to substitute in the point 0, 0. So I have 0. I don't know what symbol's going in here. That's my goal to figure out. Then I have negative 2 times 0 plus negative 2. Well, on the left-hand side, I have 0. On the right-hand side, I have 0 plus negative 2. So here I have 0, some question mark inequality, and negative 2. And now I have to think through, would it be the less than or equal to or the greater than or equal to symbol from right here that makes the most sense? And because 0 is greater than negative 2, the symbol that makes the most sense here is my greater than or equal to, because if I were to put a symbol in here, greater than or equal to would make that point 0, 0 true in that inequality. So the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to rewrite this equals sign, and I'm going to rewrite my equation as the linear inequality that represents the graph I see here. So here I have y is greater than or equal to negative 2x plus a negative 2. So example 2 here, I'm going to start the exact same way. I notice here that this definitely is an inequality because I see a line with shading. So I'm going to be writing a linear inequality here as well. And I want to start by writing the equation for the line into y equals mx plus b form. So here, if I'm looking for my slope, here I can see a point on my graph, and here I can see a point on my graph. Those are 2 points that are very clear to me. So my rise is up 1, my run is in the positive right direction 1. So my slope is 1 over 1, or just 1. Then my b value, if I look at it, it's where I'm crossing the y-axis. So that's this point right here when y is -2. So the equation I have for this line is y is equal to 1x plus -2. Now from here, my next step is to figure out which inequality I have. Well, the first thing I notice is that my graph is dotted, and that's telling me that my inequality is one of these two. There's no equal sign underneath because of the dotted line. Then from here, the next thing I need to do is decide which of these two inequalities makes the most sense. Well, in order to do that, I need to find a point in the shaded region. So here I'm going to pick this point right here, which is x is 3, y is -1. And here I'm going to plug this in and figure out which way my inequality needs to face so that point works in my inequality. So here I have y, which is -1. I have some question mark symbol going in there. 1 times 3 plus -2. So my left-hand side is -1, my right-hand side is 3 plus -2, which is 1. And so I need to figure out what symbol goes between -1 and 1. Well, I know that -1 is less than 1, which is telling me that this symbol right here is what makes the most sense. Because if I were to rewrite this question mark right here, as an actual symbol, that is the symbol that would make that point work. So now I'm going to take my equation and rewrite it with the correct inequality. So I have y is less than 1x plus -2. And final example here. So again, I see that I have a linear inequality because I have a line that then has shading. And so in order to write the inequality for a linear inequality, I need to start by writing the equation for this line right here. And the first thing I notice here is that this isn't a typical line written in y equals mx plus b form. This is a vertical line. And so I'm already thinking that this is a little bit different, and this is one of my equations that only contains one variable. Now, I don't really remember which variable x or y this is, so what I'm going to do to help me remember is I'm going to look at some points on this graph. So this is the point x is -2, y is 5. X is -2, y is 3. X is -2, y is 1. X is -2, y is -1. And what I'm noticing right here is that x is always equal to -2. That is the kind of constraint on my points. The y values can be anything, but x is always -2. So the equation for this line is actually x equals -2. That represents this vertical line here. Then from here, I need to look at the line. So I look here at this line, I notice that it is solid. So I have a less than or equal to or a greater than or equal to sign that's going to be used for my inequality. And then from here, this one's kind of a trick part, this part 2. It says look at the shading, is it below or above? Well, it's not really below or above, it's to the left or to the right. So what we need to do here is we need to pick a point that needs to work in our inequality. So here I notice that I have the point 0, 0, and that needs to work in my inequality regardless of how I write it. So here I'm going to put 0 in for x. I have a question mark as my inequality symbol, and I have -2 on the right. And if I realistically think about this, I realize that in order to make this true, make the point 0, 0 work, I need to have a greater than or equal to symbol. So then I'm going to rewrite this as x is greater than or equal to -2. Now with these vertical and horizontal lines, there's actually a little bit of a shortcut here. And what I want you to notice with this shaded area is that this shaded area contains points with x values of -1, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It contains every y value for those, and it contains all of the x values on the bigger side of -2. So there's actually a little bit quicker of a way you can write this if you see the pattern, noticing that for every point, x is bigger than -2, so we can write x is greater than or equal to -2.